Good morning from SFG Top Performance. Welcome you all back to another exciting episode. And with us today, we have our regulars. We have Derek, Charles, and Jason. Some of the topics we're going to be covering today are going to be SDS in soybeans, last-minute agronomy product preparations, our spring equipment update, and field forecasting tool. Derek, would you like to start us off with SDS, please?
Sure would. So as we're going into this spring and we're dealing with some wetter weather now, I wanted to talk about SDS and soybeans a little bit. What SDS is it's sudden death syndrome, and most people are pretty familiar with it and have seen it in their experiences growing soybeans. So I just wanted to dive into a little bit about where we see it mostly and what we can do to help control it. So as we know, sudden death syndrome is favored by wet conditions in soybeans. So when we have weather like this, it's conducive for fungus growth. And when we have wet weather all through the year, it generally shows up more than when it's dry. What sudden death syndrome is, it's actually a soil-borne fungus, but can't be controlled with our top dress fungicides. So it's a soil-borne fungus that's always in the field. And if you have it there, you'll probably have it forever. So it's mostly just trying to figure out where it is and manage it the best we can in those fields and in those spots of the fields. It's found primarily, or it starts in the low areas of the field where water sits mostly, which makes a little bit of sense. And you'll see it first in those areas. Beginning of August, you'll start seeing those areas yellowing, and that'll be a telltale sign that it could be sudden death syndrome. Some of the symptoms of SDS are yellowing in between the veins of soybeans, and it'll start green, go to yellow, and then it'll eventually turn to brown necrosis. And that's the telltale of sudden death syndrome. To know for sure that it's sudden death syndrome and not brown stem rot, you have to go ahead and split the stalk as well. So sudden death will have a little bit browning towards the root mass, but it won't be brown in the middle of the stem in the pith like brown stem rot will be. So that's the biggest or the easiest way to tell what sudden death syndrome is. Like I said earlier, there's no in-season management for it, so we have to manage sudden death by using varieties that are resistant to it and by using a seed treatment called Saltro. We've had really good luck with Saltro and run that on a majority of our soybeans that we plant, and it has really good control of sudden death syndrome. Won't get rid of the problem forever, but it really takes a lot of the risk out of those fields that have sudden death in it. Saltro will also control soybean cyst nematode. So that's just an extra benefit because generally soybean cyst nematode and sudden death syndrome as an added effect can really hurt yield. I mean, there's numbers all over the board. I was reading some stuff this morning that it can go to 20 to 80% yield loss. So if you have a field that's really bad on sudden death syndrome, it can be a almost complete yield loss. So it doesn't take much of that investment to get that yield back. And one interesting fact that I learned recently is sudden death syndrome can actually survive on corn residue. So even in those fields of corn after they're harvested, that pathogen can survive on the corn residue or corn seed that falls onto the ground and show back up next year in soybeans. So it's a disease that's always going to be around for us and we'll have to manage. And the best ways to manage it are going to be using those resistant varieties and using a product like Saltro. And now we'll hear a quick word from our sponsor this week.
Remember black and white TVs or 8-track tape or that annoying dial-up sound? All of these at one time or another were the best, and then something better came along, including Saltro fungicide seed treatment. By providing superior control of SDS without any of the stress shown in plants treated with other seed treatments like Levo, Saltro is SDS protection upgraded. Stop by your local Smith Fertilizer and Grain location to learn more about how you can upgrade your SDS protection with Saltro fungicide seed treatment. Always read and follow label directions.
Thank you from our sponsors. And now this nice weather, we've had a couple nice days to tease us. It looks like spring's just around the corner and we'll be in the field and ready to go. So I guess everybody needs to make sure our last minute preparations are ready. And I guess number one thing I worry about is your seed. Is it ready? Are you ready to put it on the right acre? Do you know what population you're going to plant it at? So the day that you go to the field, you're not frantically making a phone call to somebody to figure out which population this seed needs planted at and that seed needs planted at. But now is the time to have everything prepared and make sure it's all ready. And I was listening to a deal the other day, and I thought it was kind of interesting. The agronomist at that company, and I don't remember where I was listening to it, so they took the seed tag off and they put a field name and population on the label. So every farmer knew that this box goes to this field and it needs planted at that population. And I thought that was a really good idea. Maybe not to go to that extreme to take the tag off, but to put that in with your seed to know which field it goes to, what population you're going to plant it at, and what depth you want to plant it at, which is also important to make sure that your planter is ready, your depth is set. And when you go to the field, make sure you double check that and don't keep planting. Make sure your depths are all consistent and your population is working and everything, the chains haven't slipped or something hasn't happened to cause some population issues as well. So the number one thing is getting your seed in the right place, in the right depth, and everything correct. And then another thing to worry about that's probably just as important is your fertilizer. Is it all applied? Have you ordered everything? Have you made accommodations for sulfur and micronutrients to make sure you're getting it in your soil at some point? If you haven't done it pre, have you thought about a post application of top dress AMS or microsync or some other foliar options? We have several different options out there, and there's a lot of them on the market anymore that are very effective and a good way to feed the plant if you haven't fed the soil. So as long as we're getting, those micros to the plant, we're good to go then. And then another preparation, have you made all your plans for your chemicals? Are you ready for your pre's? Is your agronomy plan complete to make sure you get your pre's on before the weeds take over and before we have a problem? Keeping a residual product on the field at all times to make sure they're clean so we don't have to fight killing the weeds out there. And then as we're planning, it's time to start thinking about fungicides. I know that's months away, but hey, this farm's a little resistant to I shouldn't need it on this farm, but this farm I'm going to need it on. So think about that as you're planting the seed as well. What's going to be a good fit for fungicides and where am I going to have to put the inputs throughout the summer? So with all of our preparations for our agronomy plans, Charles, what equipment preparations have we, and where are we at with equipment for spring?
As far as equipment, most of the equipment is out and ready to go. We've got a few toolbars have been out to the country so far this spring. Hasn't really been too much application in the area. All the tanks have been gone through and are unlocked and ready to go. But as in the anhydrous side, Super Grill, we just did a little bit at the beginning of this week. Had one in basically a day and a half of good weather. Had a pretty good run there, but got the bugs out of everything. Everything's still working. Dry fertilizer, they had a day or two they ran. We just need some dry weather. But the side dress machine, as in for side dress urea, Jason's finishing getting it ready to go. So it'll be ready for top dress. I'm going to try it out, do some spreading this spring, do some crop ground, make sure everything's working good. But outside of that, we're ready to go. We just need some good weather.
Great. So as we go forward with getting equipment ready and making your last minute preparations on your agronomy plans, Derek, what are some of the things that we look forward to assisting the growers with this year as their crops are coming up?
So this year, we are going to make a big push towards the field forecasting tool again. We've talked about that a handful of times. Again, it's that crop model that models nitrogen, potassium, and water throughout the season. We're going to be out in the fields taking tissue samples, really monitoring what's going on out there, know what nutrients are deficient, know what we need to do for next year and what we can fix this year. And right now here, before we get too busy, is the time to make sure we have all that pre-season information inputted. Our field forecasting tool uses a lot of information by soil type, soil test, previous harvest information. So it's easiest to just get all those fields ready to go now, so then we won't have to be scrambling in the spring once we're out in the field looking at emergence, doing some crop scouting. We want to make sure that we have all that information in already, so we can just focus on your field and focus on the recommendations we can make and do better. We're going to take those tissue samples here during the season, and then that's going to show us what we can do to maximize yield this year.
That's great. That's great. A lot of good information this week. And as we look forward to who we are and what we're doing, we lots of times think of someone that's qualified, that does well in their task, as being a craftsman and having craftsmanship. And we think of the same thing here at Smith Fertilizer and Grain. No matter what you do, whether you're a designer, a baker, electrician, a farmer, or an agronomist, your job is a craft. We at SFG learn to think of our work as practice towards becoming an absolute expert as to what we do. Craftsmanship is not a destination, it's a lifelong discipline. It's near impossible to capture all the nuances craftsmanship carries, but when you see it, feel it, experience it, you know it. It's the quality of the work, it's the passion for betterment, it's experience. Craftsmanship is the quality that comes from creating with passion, care, and attention to detail. It is a quality that is honed, refined, and practiced over the course of a career. It is a quality that defines the difference between a Timex and a Rolex. It's the quality that defines the difference between SFG and everybody else. I want to thank you for joining us today on our SFG Top Performance. We hope that we've given you some good sound information. Next week, we're having a special guest join us, so please be sure to tune in and listen to us again. Again, we want to thank you for the business you've offered us in the past, and again, thank you for the business you're going to offer us in the future. With that, good day.